watch. Former Secretary of State joins us here, Eric Clark. Secretary, how you doing? Thanks for joining us. Thanks for taking the time.
Well, thank you very much, Dave. I'm glad to be back on. It's been a while since I've been on SuperTalk, and I appreciate the opportunity. I hope you all are well. Our thoughts and prayers are for everybody in the storm as well as the coronavirus. There's a lot of challenges these days.
It has been a challenging year. That's probably the best way to put it. Now, do want to thank you as well on behalf of our compatriots here at News Mississippi, newsms.fm. You can go and you can read the guest editorial that the secretary here wrote regarding Initiative 65. And I want to just give you the floor for a minute and let you hit the high points of what you feel about Initiative 65 on the ballot Tuesday.
Well, again, thanks for the opportunity to do that. And of course, I'm long removed from state politics, and I'm speaking as a citizen, but one who still loves and cares deeply about our state. I want to make it clear to begin with that I support medical marijuana for people who have terrible pain, who have debilitating illnesses, and I think our legislature needs to pass a sound medical marijuana law to help people that need help. But I'm absolutely opposed to Initiative 65. There's just a lot of problems with it. I would ask you first, and there's a long-standing rule in power politics, and that is follow the money. So think about now who's putting the money up. I mean, literally millions of dollars, something like $5 million last I heard. A whole lot of it is coming from out-of-state marijuana companies who want to come in here and make a ton of money selling marijuana in Mississippi. And I mean, think about all the ads you're hearing on the radio. We've gotten several glossy color mail-outs in the mail saying how wonderful this is going to be. Follow the money. I mean, why is that money being spent? It's being spent in a large part by out-of-state companies that want to make a great deal of money selling a lot of marijuana in Mississippi. Now, again, let me emphasize, I think we need a medical marijuana law in our state to help people that are in pain. It does not need to be in our Constitution. Constitutions are hard to change, and anytime you pass a major law by the legislature that changes policy, in all likelihood, it's going to need to be tweaked and fine-tuned. You come back and adjust it. Well, this is working, that's not working. The Constitution is really hard to change, and so this proposal is 7 pages long. It goes into a lot of detail, and in my opinion, a whole lot of detail that's really terrible. But it's going to be, if this passes next Tuesday, if Initiative 65 passes next Tuesday, it'll be in the Constitution. It'll be really hard to change. It would take another proposal for the changing the Constitution, which would have to be voted on again by the people. A much, much, much better way to do this is just to say, all right, legislature, come in calmly, carefully, listen to all sides, pass a reasonable medical marijuana law that lets people get help that are in pain, that need help. Now, let me look at some specifics here. In the western states that have recreational marijuana, generally they always have a local option whether you want to do this or not. In other words, if a local town, a local county wants to opt out, they can. And even like in California, my understanding is that most of the towns, most of the local communities don't want anything to do with it, don't have it. That's not an option under this constitutional amendment proposal. In other words, sale of marijuana stores could be on every main street in Mississippi, and there's absolutely nothing that the local community can do about it. Your local town boards, city boards, county boards of supervisors would have zero authority to keep it out if this passes next Tuesday. I don't think we want that. I don't think the people of Mississippi want that. So that needs to be really important, and it needs to be on folks' minds. All right? Let's look at taxes. I particularly object to what this says about taxes. It says, first off, that medical marijuana would be taxed at the rate of the general state sales tax, which is 7%. And there are 2 problems with that. One is it would all go to support the medical marijuana program. None of that money could be used for anything else that we need. It could not be used for education or mental health or police, and we'll probably need more police if we have this to pass. Couldn't be used for highways, all medical marijuana. And since it would be in the Constitution, the legislature could not come back and change either how much tax is paid or where it goes. Now, let me just give you some comparisons. I did a little analysis on the internet of places that have a lot of marijuana sales in the West. Oregon charges 17% tax, Nevada 25%, Colorado 30%, Washington 37%. But under this initiative 65, we're locked into the Constitution at 7%, and it all would go to support medical marijuana. I just think that's nuts. I mean, candidly, I think that is ridiculous, and I don't think that's what we need. All right? What could you get it for? Well, the initiative spells out several illnesses that specifically people could get the medical marijuana for, but then it has two real catch-alls. It says, I'm reading this, for chronic or debilitating pain, and the other one is another medical condition of the same kind or class. In my mind, those are really vague. And so if you get an unscrupulous doctor and an unscrupulous patient, I mean, I've got pain, and so give me marijuana, and he gives you a card that says you can go buy marijuana at the store for the next year, and I just think that's dangerous as can be. All right, so I think it's really, in other words, there's the potential of abuse just widespread. Now, you tell me when to hush, Dave, and I'll hush.
You're doing great. I don't want to interrupt you at all. Just keep going.
All right. I kind of get on a roll here. I'm usually a pretty low-key guy, but I'm fired up about this. I think this is going to be really bad for our state if this passes.
Well, and you know, one thing I do want to go back to that you mentioned, that I've got something that illustrates perfectly when you said how difficult it would be to change this. And we've been saying that, we've been talking about that for weeks now, that once it goes in the Constitution, it's very difficult and a long, lengthy process to change it. And we can illustrate that with Initiative 65 itself, because I have the copy right here, and if you can see it on SuperTalk TV up at the front, it's got the date where it was received at the Secretary of State's office, where this process started. Stamped, received, Elections Division. The date, July 30th, 2018. Over 2 years ago, this started. You're going to have that same process to change anything about Initiative 65 if we decide some part of it isn't working. So you're looking at another 2 years possibly, or longer, before anything could be changed in it.
That's a possibility. And the other way, of course, the Constitution can be changed is it can be proposed by the legislature. But my point is, this is not proper constitutional material. I mean, if you go and read our Constitution, you've got sections, and most of them are like a paragraph, or maybe a couple of paragraphs if it's a complicated subject. This is 7 pages long. It is absurd to put it in our Constitution. And again, you've got all these details. And let me look at amounts, okay? And again, this is all written into the thing. It says that if a doctor gives you one of these cards, that you can get 2.5 ounces of marijuana at the local marijuana store on your local main street, that you cannot keep from being there, every 2 weeks. Now, I have read that what does that mean in practical terms? That means you could buy 300 joints a month, one person, for a year, okay? So obviously, there's the potential for abuse because, in other words, if you have somebody that wants to get a card, a doctor will give you the card, you go buy 300 joints a month. If you want to go sell it on the street, you can go sell it on the street. I mean, obviously it's against the law, but I have absolutely no doubt that that would happen. And so we just got all kind of problems in this. And again, let me emphasize, I think we need a legitimate, sensible, regulated medical marijuana program in the state, but it needs to be passed by the legislature. It does not need to be in the Constitution because it needs to be carefully done. This is not well worded. It is. You hear people say all the time, the devil's in the details. The devil is in this way above the level of the details. I mean, you don't want to write in there how much you can get, 300 joints a month for a year. You don't want to say that you can get it basically if you can convince the doctor you're in severe pain. You don't want to put a locked-in 7% sales tax that can only go to support medical marijuana and can't go for any other thing that we need to spend money on in this state, like education, like police, like mental health, like highways. None of that could get a dime under this proposal. I mean, literally not a dime. The legislature could not alter the amount of tax paid on it. So here's what I think we ought to do. This is what I
tell you what, if you can hold that until after the break, we're up against a break. I want to hear your recommendations about what we need to do with this. If you can just hang on.
I'm good. Be here as long.
Secretary of State Eric Clark. And Secretary, right before the break, I hated to interrupt you because you were on another roll. I want to get back to, because in the grandest tradition of sitting at the coffee shop, you were about to solve our problems for us. You were going to tell us what you would like to see happen in regards to medical marijuana in the state. And you have the floor, Secretary. Go ahead.
Well, again, Dave, thank you very much. Now, if anybody has just tuned in, let me rant just a moment here. Again, let me repeat a little bit of my rant here. Initiative 65 on the ballot next Tuesday, I think, is just terrible. And again, I support a good medical marijuana law in our state, but this is not it. So what I think we need, in my opinion, other folks obviously disagree, but that's my opinion, very strong opinion. I've already voted absentee, so I have this in my head how it works. Under our initiative process, there are two questions. The first one is, are you for initiative? Are you for basically initiative 65 or no? Yes or no? I suggest you vote no. Just vote no on the front, the first one. And then there's a second question down below. Well, if it passes, are you for 65 or are you for 65A, 65 alternative? I voted no, and then I voted for 65A. 65A is an alternative that the legislature proposed, which says that it's very simple, it's very short. It says that we will have medical marijuana in Mississippi, but the details will be left up to the legislature. And if we have, I hope the whole thing fails. And I don't think this is a proper constitutional matter. But if we pass one, for goodness sakes, let's pass 65A. So again, I voted no, and then I voted for 65A, because if it's going to be put in the Constitution at all, it doesn't need to spell out all these details. It needs to let the legislature fill in the details, which I'm certain that they would do based on analysis and hearing from all sides and careful consideration. Have I got another minute or two, Dave?
Definitely. Go right ahead.
Okay, because I'm sure some people have come on board here since my first rant, so I want to summarize my rant here. I'll do it more quickly than I did the first time again. But again, $5 million being spent to put this in our Constitution, a huge amount of it by out-of-state marijuana companies. This is not what we need, all right? Generally speaking, again, this is not a proper constitutional matter. If we get it wrong here, it's going to be very hard to change, and there's a lot wrong with this. So let's don't put it in the Constitution. Let's put it in general law that the legislature can tweak. As I said a moment ago, this would not give the power to local governments to opt out. Unlike, for example, even in the West, in California and other states where they have recreational marijuana, local governments can say, we don't want it in our town, we don't want it in our county. That's not in here. It could be put on the main street of every town in Mississippi if this passes next Tuesday. I mean, that's just nuts. I can't believe the people of Mississippi want that. You have the grocery store and the drugstore and the marijuana store on Main Street, and you cannot keep it out. That's not what we need in Mississippi. That's ridiculous. Okay, again, taxes locked in 7%. It all has to go to medical marijuana. Can't be used for anything else. Can't be used for education, police, highways, mental health, nothing else. The tax rate could not be changed. It ranges in the West, where this is super popular, anywhere from 17% to 37%. We'd be locked in at 7%. Okay, very vague as to what this could be given for in terms of conditions. Quote, chronic and debilitating pain. What does that mean? I mean, you got an unscrupulous doctor, an unscrupulous patient. It could mean anything. Huge amounts. You could get up to you get one of these cards, you could buy up to 300 joints a month for a year. You could resell it on the street. Obviously, I don't mean to say anybody that gets it would, but that is a danger. I am certain that would happen. We'd need more police. We wouldn't have any more money to pay them, but we need more because we're going to have more problems. Now, how do we defeat it? Again, first, just vote no on Initiative 65, and then drop down and vote. Below that, vote for 65A, the alternative, which would put it back to the legislature and let them write the law. That is my
Let me ask you something.
My hope. Okay.
Let me ask you something, because one of the arguments that we see on the C Spire text line and other places is that the legislature has had their opportunity. They've had years. Why didn't they do anything? And some people just don't trust the legislature to go ahead and do this, even if 65A passes. Now, as a former state legislator and a former Secretary of State, what's your opinion on that? What's your response to those people who say, well, I'm not voting for 65A, they're still not going to do anything?
Well, first off, I mean, do you want to blow the world up because of the lack of action by the legislature so far? I mean, 65 is terrible. 65 will do immense damage to our state, in my opinion. That's not a viable option, in my opinion. I don't want marijuana stores on every main street in Mississippi. So that's not something we need to do. Now, to the question you're asking, given all this attention and all this obvious support for medical marijuana in the state, I absolutely believe that the legislature will pass a medical marijuana law that will be reasonable, that everybody can come in and comment on, that they can get opinions on, from the folks who support it, from the medical community, from the police, from all citizens of all sides. I confidently predict that the legislature will adopt a medical marijuana law if this fails, because 65 on the ballot next Tuesday would, in my opinion, be extraordinarily damaging to our state and our citizens. Why do we want high school kids who go to school in the morning to drive by the local marijuana store on their way to school? Why do we want it next to the Burger King? Is that what we want in Mississippi? I don't think so.
Well, unfortunately, there's a large group who have decided this is the way to get it done. And let's loop back around again and give you a chance to reiterate this, because I've heard this from just about everyone, and I've said the same thing. It's not as simple as if you're for medical marijuana, you have to vote for 65. Otherwise, you're against it entirely. That's not the point, and I think the point of the opposition by a lot of folks to Initiative 65 is either being missed or ignored by some of the proponents. It's not about medical marijuana. It's about the execution of the program, right?
Well, yes. And again, the legislature can fix this problem. They can pass a medical marijuana law. And I get that they haven't up to this point, but there never has been this much attention on it. There never has been this obvious support for it. And I believe that they will. So I think that we ought to allow the legislature to have the option to fix this wisely and well. In other words, this is really like I've got mosquitoes outside, so I'm going to set off a TNT on my front porch to get rid of the mosquitoes. This is not smart, folks. The citizens of Mississippi, which I've lived here 69 years, I love it. I've spent my whole life trying to make it better. 65 is bad news. It will do damage to our state. It will do damage to the young people of our state who will see this every day on Main Street, the local marijuana store, and say, there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that. Sure, I'll do that. This is not good. The legislature needs to fix the problem. I think with all this attention, with all this obvious support, I believe they will fix it. I think they will pass a reasonable medical marijuana law. So again, my request and my hope is we vote no initially, because I think whether this passes or not, I think the legislature is going to take this up and address it. But then go down to the second question and vote for 65A, which says it's going to be in the Constitution that we're going to have medical marijuana, and the legislature is going to write a law.
And again, the perfect option, in your opinion, is for this thing to fail completely and then put it into statute instead of into the Constitution, which both 65 and 65A will do. The difference between the two is 65A, law enforcement, the medical community, teachers, everybody will have a say in how it's constructed and how it's implemented, whereas with 65, what you see is what you get.
That's exactly right. And 65 will be very, very hard to change. And let's say we wake up 2 years from now and we've got marijuana stores on every street in the state, and we've got marijuana that was obtained under this, which is then being turned around and sold on the street illegally. We've got to amend the Constitution to fix that. That's nuts.
Former Secretary of State Eric Clark, we appreciate your time, sir, and get back in touch with us next time you're fired up. We'd love to have you back.
All right, Dave. Thanks a bunch. You guys have a great day.